Krishna Ramkumar. So, just a brief highlight about him. Krishna graduated from IIT Bombay in 2008 with President's Gold Medal for Best Overall Performance. He worked with BCG for 2 years before founding Avanti Fellows in 2010. Avanti's learning centers provide low-income high school students a world-class science and math education. The focus is on teaching students how to learn from books, videos, and their peers. I'm sure Krishna can describe their methodology better. Avanti has won several awards like Stanford Social E-Challenge, Ecoing Green, Draper Richards Kaplan Fellowships, and the Ashoka Fellowship. With this, I will not take much time and welcome Krishna Ramkumar.
Thanks so much. I was just joking with the organizers that so I entered IIT in 2003 and my elder brother was then a fourth year student in IIT. And I lived through his shadow basically for the first 1 year. And I was telling them that it seems like 10 years since I joined IIT, I'm still living in his shadow. Because if you look at the poster downstairs, my elder brother's name on it. It was Ramkumar. He'll have a good laugh. I sent him the photograph. Anyway. Right, so I'll start off. I thought I'll spend around 15-20 minutes talking about my journey since I graduated from IIT. And then we can spend 10 questions talking through FAQs hopefully. So when I started off, basically I would say that in many ways I'm an accidental entrepreneur first and then a social entrepreneur. I didn't have a dream growing up of being an entrepreneur. It just sort of happened. Right? So after IIT, I did 2 years at the consulting firm BCG. Like most confused IITians, I was confused about signing away 5 years of my life to an academic PhD. And I thought, okay, let's just take the highest paying job on campus. So that was how I started my career. But I think very few months into BCG, I knew that was not what I wanted to do with my life. Right? So I started looking around for interesting things. And obviously Mohammed Yunus, many people here know Mohammed Yunus, and I started reading his books. He's like the godfather of everybody who comes into this space at some point has worshipped, at least I worshipped him when I was 24, the founder of microfinance, right? So I read about what he did, and for me, the most interesting thing that he mentioned was that most problems of the poor can be thought of as business problems, and with solutions that are not only charity, right? So that was the most interesting for me. So then I thought maybe I should get into this sector. And so 1.5 years into my time at BCG, I went to one of my partners there, who is a role model for me, and I said, I basically drove home with him for half an hour. And I told him what I was thinking and what I should do, right? So like, the only thing that consulting had taught me in the first 2 years was that most problems can be explained in 3 bullet points. So I put up my problem in 3 bullet points. I told him my first bullet point was, I'm fairly certain I want to get into the social sector. My first bullet point was, I want to get into social consulting. If consulting is not bad enough, there's a new breed of social consulting firms who believe that you need consulting for even NGOs. Right? So there are many in India. So I thought maybe social consulting sounds like exactly the good cushy job where you're still doing consulting, making lots of money, and also feeling good about what you're doing. Right? So I thought that seemed like a good thing. And I explored, I thought that was a good thing. So Dalberg was my firm I wanted to go to. I don't know how people know about Dalberg. Then the second option I laid out for him was going to a social venture fund. So Acumen and Avishkar are the 2 big ones in India that make venture investments in social enterprises. Again, a very loaded word, but that sounded very exciting. So I said that was my second option. And I said the third option was maybe I'll go work for an exciting startup, because again, it's cool to work at startups. So there was a startup called Under the Mango Tree, which is actually a very interesting social sector organization. They train rural farmers to rear honey and they sell it in urban India. In the process, they make money and the farmers make money. So I thought that was a very interesting business idea. And the interesting thing was that partner, he said, all right, these 3 bullet points look fine, but I have a 4th bullet point for you. Why don't you start something on your own? And I never thought of that till then, right? Because I think, especially for a Tamran boy for whom business is a fairly vague idea, I never thought about starting something on my own. I always thought I should study further, become a professor and so on. So even the thought of starting something on my own at the age of 24 was fairly daunting. But once he brought it up, I said, that sounds like actually a good idea. It sounds like something that might be better than what I'm currently doing. So then I went around looking for ideas to solve, right? And I picked this idea because what I felt was that there's several problems in the social sector, right? So let's say, for example, that I wanted to solve the problem of sanitation for women in rural India, right? I think it's a massive problem to be solved, but I don't think I'm the right person to solve that problem because I know very little about sanitation and rural women, right? So I thought the one thing I know a little bit about, at least, is to get into IIT, right? I understand that it's very difficult to get into IIT. I had very few peers in my batch who were from low-income homes. Almost everybody was, I would say most people are actually from middle-class backgrounds who want to reach the next level. Very few rich people, very few poor people at the IITs, right? So I said that is an interesting problem. Can we get more students, not, obviously IIT cannot be the goal for everybody, but can we get more students from low-income backgrounds into IIT? So that was what we started off with, right? And in 2010, we won some money at a business plan competition. We didn't have a business idea then, but people thought the idea of getting kids into IIT was interesting enough and they gave us some money. So then I had no excuse, right? I put in my papers and I started in, I think, August 2010 on this idea. How do we get more students from poor backgrounds into IIT? That was the idea, right? So then we said, now let's brainstorm. How do we solve this problem? And we thought there must be 3 obstacles, right? I think any layman would think of these obstacles. Our big obstacles were, the first was awareness. Very few students from low-income backgrounds even know what IIT means. If you ask them what IIT means, many people come to me and say, "Ha sir, wo to hai Infosys wala, wahi hoga." They think IIT is IT. They've all heard ITs in there. So that's the first problem. So how do we spread awareness about the good colleges amongst low-income families? The second problem that we thought was that these coaching classes are basically, because of their price point, made it impossible for anybody from a lower middle class family to get into IIT. So we said the second problem is the coaching class. We have to somehow solve that problem. And the third problem, all of us thought, was finance. We thought, oh, poor people obviously cannot pay for education, so money must be a problem. So we thought maybe we should hand out scholarships, right? I think we've been proven to be wrong on multiple dimensions. So what I'll do is over the next 10 minutes, I think talk about the several failures we've had, I think, in the last 3 years, and a few successes. That's what I describe. We've done a lot of things, several failures, and maybe a few successes. So the first assumption that we had, right, the fact that poor people cannot pay for education, was, I thought, completely obvious, but actually turned out to be completely flawed. Because, so let's take the example of, let's take a low-income kid who gets into IIT, right? I know the IIT Alumni Association has a fund to pay their fees. And from the minute I found out that every student who comes to IIT essentially can get a zero-interest loan from a bank to study at IIT, I thought that fund does not have any, maybe the fund has some good, there's good reasons for it to be there, but to me it made no sense. Why should there be a scholarship fund when somebody can take a zero-interest loan to get into IIT, right? So while all of us think that finance is a problem, there are zero-interest loans. The government today gives out 10,000 crore in education loans, out of which a large percentage of those are zero-interest loans subsidized by the government. So finance clearly is not a problem, right? Maybe a problem is people do not know that loans exist. But finance was definitely not a problem. So that was one of the assumptions that I think were proved wrong, right? The other assumption was around just the fact that how much are people willing to pay. So I don't know how many of you have heard about James Tooley. James Tooley is this professor who sets up who did research actually on low-cost private schools across the world. And what he found out was that in many poor places, for example in the slums of Hyderabad, poor people are willing to spend a large amount of money to go to school, right? So in Hyderabad, for example, most low-income students spend around 1,000 rupees per month to go to a school which is run by the low-cost private school, very often in a slum. So that would mean that your maths class is in the first floor of one slum, 3 blocks away to the left, your science class is there. So it's spread out, but taught by private people who charge a fee, right? And a large percentage, more than 60% of low-income students, I would say, in Hyderabad study in these schools, right? So there was a lot of research to show that that is a wrong thing to assume that they cannot pay. But we always thought they could not pay, right? So that was the other challenge. Anyway, so that was the problem we identified. And the version 1 of what we did was we partnered with a bunch of coaching classes and we said we're going to find the best students from low-income backgrounds. You teach them for free, right? And the coaching classes said, of course, we teach them for free. Sounds good. The other thing we did was we were very passionate about setting up student volunteer teams. So I went across the first 1 year from 2010 to 11. I went to 5 IITs and set up a student team, something like Mood Indigo for the social sector. We set up student teams across the IIT campuses. So we had around 200 volunteers. I was the only full-time employee. The volunteers went around, found low-income students and enrolled through a selection process, and then enrolled them in these coaching classes for free. Right? That's what we did. The other small pilot we ran was we always knew that this was an interesting start, but it was not really a scalable model, right? Because at some point, free seats will run out. So there has to be a better answer than going to coaching classes and finding free seats. So the pilot we ran was that we found 20 students from the Navodaya system. I don't know if you've heard of the Navodaya system. The central government runs rural schools in one in each district in India. So we found 20 students from across India, some from Bihar, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, Andhra, Karnataka, and we moved them to Pondicherry and said, here's content, take your HC Varmas, take a bunch of videos, and take 20 computers, and now study for the JEE. Right? So that was the pilot we ran in our first year in 2011. And what we saw after a year and a half was we had two programs, right? One in which there were a bunch of students in coaching classes studying for free, and the other where you had students who were given content and studying together in JEE Pondicherry. And what we saw was that the students who were given content were studying together in JEE Pondicherry better than the students in the coaching classes. Which is now looking back probably intuitive. Like if you ask, I know half who came to IIT went to coaching classes, many of us went to Kota. And if you ask anybody who got into IIT, who helped to get in, most people will tell you it was my friends. I studied with XYZ and almost all the time, XYZ all got into IIT or no one made it into IIT. Right? So it's common sense that you learn more from your peers. But to actually see it happening live, where students in a self-study program were doing better than students in a coaching class who were forced to run at the pace of the topper in the class. That was for us truly, it was very pivotal movement. So that happened in the middle of last year. So what we did then was we said, let's change the model a little bit. Instead of the first model where you partner, right? Let's set up learning centers where we give the best resources in terms of books and videos to students. We put them on a very structured program, right? So what that means is they are told Monday you will come to class, you spend 2 hours in class, and you will study this textbook, you will study this topic, you will watch this video. On Tuesday you will come, you will try these 5 problems. On Wednesday you will come to class, you will discuss those problems with your friends in groups of 4. Right? So put them in a very structured program where they are accessing some content, doing some group discussion with their friends, and taking tests. And they were mentored lightly by IIT students. Basically, we have IIT student volunteers, and now we have some full-time employees who are only mentoring them, right? What you're doing then is you're reducing the cost of the program drastically for those students, because the fixed costs are rent. Rent is a fixed cost. There's other small fixed costs like the academic content. But the biggest variable cost in education is the teacher's cost. And if you bring down the cost, the requirement of a teacher to, say, instead of needing a teacher for 15 hours a week, you need a teacher for 2 hours a week. That program is going to be extremely cheap, right? And what we were discovering in Pondicherry was that it was doing as well as as having a teacher for 15 hours a week. So that's why we pivoted last year, in middle of last year. This year we launched our own learning centers. We charge approximately what the low-cost private schools in James Tully's Hyderabad slums charge, which is 1,000 rupees a month. We make them come to our centers, they access content, they study with their friends, and yeah, they study for the 11th and 12th essentially, right? So, so that's what we do today. I think I'll spend now some time talking about a few of the challenges we're facing today, right? So one challenge I feel for me, one of the biggest challenges is that you're always feeling like you're fighting against the system. So when you go to a government school, many of our students come from government schools, right? We run a very selection process, we go to a bunch of government schools and pick a few students. So when I go to the government schools, very often I meet teachers who come and tell us that, I don't know how many of you are Tamilians here, but there is a word in Tamil called mannangatti, which basically means there's nothing in his head, there's mud in his head, right? Mannangatti. So when I go to schools and say, shall I find your kids and can I teach them science? Those teachers say, mannangatti, useless, they have nothing in their heads. Why are you even trying? You cannot help them, let them be, right? So for me, this was a big shock, and I've actually been reading a lot more since the last 2 years on the development sector, and there's a very interesting book called Poor Economics. So for those who are interested in the sector, it's written by 2 professors at MIT, Esther Duflo and Ajit Banerjee. It's called Poor Economics. It's basically a bunch of research on the poor. And what he says, the biggest problem in the education system is that for poor people, you have extremely high expectations and you have very little faith, right? And this is exactly what I saw in those corporation schools, right? The teachers basically have very high expectations. Unless the guy gets into IIT, he's good for nothing, he's useless, basically. And they have very little faith that anything will even help him, right? So, and there was a research study by this Esther Duflo and Ajit Banerjee where they went in India and rural Rajasthan, and they wanted to basically do some research on the psychological effects of prejudice, right, in our system. So they gave a bunch of teachers in rural Rajasthan several answer papers to correct, right? In the control group, they took away the names. So they gave a control group of teachers anonymous papers to correct. And in the test group, they gave papers with names of students on it, right? And what they saw was, on average, because especially in Rajasthan, the last name basically gives away which caste you're from. In many, that's what I've read at least, I don't know much about it. But so what happened was that on average, everybody who was from a lower caste got a lower score, irrespective of what the answers were. Because of this prejudice, right? The other most, actually, when I thought about this, I felt that maybe in many ways I have benefited from this prejudice. Because I remember in school, in IIT, I used to do fairly well in academics, and I used to come out of some certain exams thinking I've done very badly, but do very well. Because the prejudice was working a good way for me, I think. But that was very interesting. And the most interesting thing about all of this was that they saw that the low caste teachers, so they profiled the teachers, the low caste teachers and the high caste teachers, right? The low caste teachers scored the low caste kids even lower than the high caste teachers. Because the low caste teachers think inka to kuch nahi hone wala hai. And so, and I see this on a daily basis, right? So for me it's very frustrating because we're trying to do all this social good and then you're facing these challenges, and that's why I wanted to narrate that incident of the Chennai teacher who keeps saying Mannan Jetti. The other, I had some notes, so I'll just go through them quickly. Cheat sheet, yeah, forget it. I'm so unused to talking without a presentation. Right, this is the other interesting one, the girl child, right? So the girl child in India is a very sad thing, right? How discriminated against girl children are. So we face many examples of how it's sometimes fighting a losing battle when teaching the girl child, especially when we teach them in 11th and 12th. One of my colleagues, his name is Abbas, he's a very fiery character who studied at IIT actually. I convinced him to come join work with me after IIT. Very good, passionate guy, 22 years old. He was once interviewing a candidate who applied to our program, and he asked her, what do you want to do? She said, I want to be a pharmacist. So he said, okay, why do you want to be a pharmacist? Maybe there's some reason why you want to be a pharmacist. And what he found out was that she wanted to be a pharmacist because her father wanted to use her degree to rent out a space to set up a pharmacy and make money out of the pharmacy, right? And then get her married off. This is what he said. In Chennai, I'm going to Chennai because we teach some very poor kids in Chennai, right? In Chennai, very often, 70% of our class in Chennai corporation schools are girls. And one of the reasons they're girls there is because this is how many poor people think in India, unfortunately. Until 8th standard, everybody's in school because they get a free meal, etc. etc. They're good reasons to be in school. After 8th, if you're a boy and you're smart, you'll get taken out of a government school and you'll go to a private school because at least they teach you something there and it's well worth spending the money. If you're a boy and you're considered average or below average, you're taken out and made to work to earn some money for the family. If you're a girl, you don't know what to do with her basically, so you just leave her in the government school. So most government schools in Chennai only have girls. And so we thought it's great, it looks very good on our impact metrics because we're teaching so many girls. People, all funders ask us, how many girls are you teaching? We're very good at teaching girls. And we started teaching all these girls, and then we started meeting the parents. And the parents, the teachers are anyway prejudiced. The parents will come and tell us, in Tamil, I just say it in Hindi because I'm sure many people know Tamil here. They'll come and tell us कि अब उनको क्यों सिखा रहे हैं? वैसे भी 12th के बाद तो शादी कराएंगे इनका, ठीक है ना? लोग ये रहने दे, पास तो करा दो उनका. This is what they should tell us, right? So for us, it's very frustrating. I think I want to find this remaining. So maybe I'll end with a couple of incidents on people. So people keep asking me, what does your family think about this? So I think I define my family as my parents and my wife. So I'll tell you what both sets of people think about what we're trying to do. So my parents firstly are very happy with what we're trying to do. Because my parents are a little crazy, socialist, and they're doctors, but they work in a government hospital, not a government hospital, they don't make too much money. They're not private practice, they're doctors. And they've always felt that we should do something good for society. So I think they're they were actually very confused with my brother's career plans, because he came to IIT, and after IIT he went to Capital One, which is a bank. At least in consulting you can confuse people. You're doing something, they don't really know what you're doing, so it's okay. When you're working in a bank, everybody knows what you're doing, right? So my father said, "Kya ho gaya?" And bache Capital One gaya in the US. So they were very disillusioned with my brother. He's working in Capital One. So they're very happy that somebody at least is doing something that is saving the name of our family. So I think they're very happy. I think a lot of this actually comes back to your roots, right? My grandfather was very passionate about education. So the only thing he kept telling me was that I have had 70 PhD students in my life. How many will you have? So he was a professor of chemistry in fact. And he had, that's one of the reasons I actually studied chemistry. He was very, he wanted me to be a chemist, and I also studied chemistry in 11th and 12th. And he said, the only question he would have as he grew older and older is, how many PhD students are you going to guide? Right? So this is one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. My father was a slightly different case, because he was actually an MBA student from IIM Ahmedabad, and he was a CA and so on. He worked as a CFO in many companies. So he was in fact very happy with my resume at BCG. That's very good. My son-in-law is going to be working at BCG. So initially he was slightly confused why I quit. But I think the fact that I was from IIT was helped it a little bit. Well, I think the turning point in that whole thinking was when I think 2 years back or a year and a half back, Outlook covered what we do, and I was on the front page of Outlook. So from that day, suddenly on the coffee table at home there's an Outlook magazine. So I think as long as you really want to do something, things work out. So yeah, so that's my story. I just wanted to narrate a few incidents about what I've learned in the last few years, and a little bit about what we do. I didn't want to bore you about exactly what we do, because as Tucker was telling me, all that is on the website. So people who want to see that can see it anyway. Yeah. So thanks so much for your patient hearing. Yeah, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Do you still feel that?
Yeah.
Do you still feel that you're fighting against the system, and what are you?
Yeah. So I think
doing about it?
One of the things I've done about is set up a for-profit organization. That's one of the things I've done, because I am now of the firm belief that most government schools are basically doing more harm than good. There is an organization called the Center for Civil Society in Delhi that's fighting the battle for the voucher system, where they're saying that the government should just hand out vouchers to private schools. So now we've set up our own for-profit that is it's essentially a low-cost training academy today, or a coaching class, which is a word that people don't like to hear. But actually I have come to believe that, again, this is a very non-profit for-profit thing. The minute you set up a for-profit, right, your customers change very differently, right? Suddenly all you care about is the kids. You don't really care about the funder so much. So when I was a non-profit, the funder kept asking me, how are you different from a coaching class? I would give them some long answer, basically. The kids come and ask us कि sir आप ये peer learning वगैरह ठीक है, but आप class हैं sir आप पढ़ाते तो हैं. This is all they want to know. In fact, the reason they come to us is because we're a low-cost coaching class, not because if we said we're a low-cost peer learning institute, nobody would come to us, right? So that's what we do. And I think the direct answer to your question really is, I think it's very difficult to. I think government systems in general are just flawed. My career plan is to build some credibility, and when I'm 39 or 40, go to someone like Azim Premji, who is now setting up a school in any district in India, and say, give me all that money. And I'll set up a bunch of low-cost schools, non-profit schools. Because I think obviously the non-profits are required. It's indisputable, because many people cannot pay, right? We'll end up serving the lower middle class to the low income families who care about education. And the only problem is to solve the government schools, but it's too frustrating for me now at this stage of my life. Yes, sir?
It's an economically sustainable model, what you do.
Yeah, it is. We're a for-profit, so we have to be. So we're charging between 1,000 to 1,500 rupees a month, depending on where we're located. So Bombay is very expensive. All coaching classes charge around between 6,000 to 10,000 rupees a month, depending on which one you look at, right? So our value proposition is much cheaper, but we're effectively a sustainable business, because our teacher cost is zero. It's negligible. We have some tutors who solve doubts, but the 1,500 rupees essentially only encompasses rent and some facilitation. So we can cover our costs. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, I'm something like very much against the coaching class, but the model which you have described about the second one, where you are just becoming the enabler of education improvement by self-study, or giving them the tools to study and learn. Okay, the first purpose of study or education, be it IIT or anywhere, where it's the learning, education and knowledge. Now, how do you want to scale it up to a larger scale where like you can see it across like every village in India?
Yeah.
So what is your plan?
So our plan is to basically partner with schools. See, our model is very simple. It's an after-school program where students come and self-study and take tests and study with each other, right? So today we're too small and we have zero credibility, which is why we're running our own centers like a coaching class. But over time, we want to partner with a bunch of schools and say that why don't you take this curriculum? This is how you run it, and we'll train you. And because you don't need an expert, you run this peer instruction. I think this might be a good time to quickly show you a 30-second video, I think. So it will come to life. This one, yeah.
Because rather what is happening nowadays is like people are taking kids out of school and then they are putting in the coaching.
Absolutely, I completely agree. No, so we're doing the same thing even in government schools for free as an after-school program. So this is just a quick example of what we mean by studying self-study. It's not like we just, it's fairly structured self-study. So we normally, after the students study a topic through their books and all that, right? We give them a few concept questions, which is a form of studies called peer instruction. Lots of people in this audience will know what I've heard that many, in fact, a few IIT Bombay professors like Professor Iyer and Professor Murthy also use this form. Right? The idea is students learn from each other. So there's a question on the board. It's a multiple choice question, and everybody is voting what they think the answer is. Right? So we're low cost, so we don't have a fancy ticker or a mobile phone. We just use placards. 50% of the class in this case said the correct answer, which was yellow, when they saw the question. So these are all kids in Kanpur. They're mostly first generation learners in Kanpur. And once they see the question and vote, right, we give them around 45, I'd say a couple of minutes actually, to discuss amongst their peers. And the two people you see there who are walking around are not subject experts of any form. Deepak is a BSc in agriculture. Manisha studied at IIT, but she's not a teacher, right? In that video she's there, right? But their job is not to teach at all. All they're doing is facilitating what these guys are doing, right? So what happens in 2 minutes is that 80% of the class gets the right answer. And there's a lot of research around this form of teaching. In fact, there's a Harvard professor, Eric Mazur, who's our main advisor. He teaches like this for the last 20 years. He's been teaching his course like this. The reason he started teaching like this was because he said, I can't teach a class of 150 anyway. So I might as well do it like this. Right? So that's sort of, the idea is that now this doesn't need any facilitation. Basically, once we prove that it works, you have to still prove it works, right? We can scale it anywhere.
And why do you think it is good only for government schools, not good for even private schools or?
For which private schools?
Yeah, of course.
It's good. I actually think, in fact, it's IB schools, which are the most expensive schools, teach like this.
Even the model, like, see one example I give you, like, it's not only which I say that coaching should not be there. What is required is the enabling, as you just mentioned it and shown it. So, like one of the schools, like their principal also said no coaching to anyone who is going to coaching means my teachers are not, and that's a private school. And private, low cost private. It's not very expensive. We are like, so you have to scale it to the national level.
I completely agree. That's the idea.
You have to just wipe out the quota factor like that.
Yeah. I couldn't do that because I'll get shot if I do that. So I'm trying to stay away from that segment. I'm trying to go into tier 3 colleges actually and make people employed.
Okay, only one last question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ali.
I'll take it my professor.
Yes. I'm a little worried because you are saying the teachers is not essential. How seriously are you saying?
No, I'm not saying the teacher is not essential. I think the role of the teacher is overplayed, right? The teacher needs to be a mentor. So what we do is, it's not like we just let the kids, we don't abandon them. We give them a teacher for around 2 to 3 hours a week. And we say, you come and ask them your doubts, right? But this actually works much better because in a class, basically if you go to any class, whether it's a coaching class or an IIT class, 90% of people are sleeping. 10% are listening to the professor. right? So anybody will tell you that this is better than having an expert teaching a half-empty class that's sleeping.
No, after 30 years of teaching here, I have also realized that I'm doing that.
Which is, yeah, so I think that the only thing I'm saying is if you reduce the requirement, then the cost also comes down. So it makes it actually viable for the poor.
Sir, you can take the discussion offline.
Yeah. Sorry for hogging this. Thanks. Thanks.
Okay, so our next speaker is Janak Daftati. I'm sure many of you already know him. He's been associated with Alumni Association, given many lectures in the previous Mumbai monthly meets. So Janak has dedicated himself to the protection of environment. He's an evangelist of rainwater harvesting and waste management, and he founded Jalsangrah in 2003. Janak is the convener of Rashtriya Jal Biradari. He heads the pollution control wing of Ganga Cleanup project currently underway. As convener of Meethi Nadi Sansad, he is working on problems of encroachment and pollution in the Meethi River. He has initiated Mumbai water audit with citizens group to make recommendations for improving water supply to the citizens. Janak graduated from IIT Bombay in 1975 and he is a distinguished service awardee. Welcome, Janak.
Without the technology, always struggled when I was here. Yeah. You can hear me at the back, right? Yeah. It's a little strange to sit or be here today. I spent several years.
Recording.
Huh?
Yeah, recording.
Okay, I'll watch my language.
No, no.
To understand my respect for professor, it's still with me. Yeah. Anyway, what I was saying is, for many years I spent a lot of time catching what we used to call bakras, get them on a month-end Saturday. And I thought I had seen the end of it, maybe 5-6 years back when I stopped. And here I am, as one of them. The only mistake I seem to have made is that in those days I used to just walk on. Because I didn't have to say anything much, And as usual now I've come here without, I have a lot to say but I haven't structured it, so you bear with me. To begin with, I think some of the questions that Himanshu had posed to me on the telephone, how has this started? I think the only real valid answer I can give is maybe 63 years ago. Been through IIT, as I said, struggled with the technology and got into the rut, got some more rubber stamps, started business and also got involved with the alumni. And in the process I had called one Rajendra Singh, who is a Magsaysay Award winner, along with Stockholm Water and some 35 other awards. But he had come to our design body December 2002, and he spoke for about an hour and 15, hour and 20, and he kept taunting us guys. He was some 75 of us, alumni, wives, children, faculty and all. And he kept prodding us, कि आप लोग के लिए तालाब तबाह हो गए. He basically came and spoke about water. At the end of his talk, and he described how he had converted an arid zone in Rajasthan into a green zone. Now, a small supplementary data I should give you here. 2000, I had taken a whole bunch of our alumni on a trip to some Boirekhord or somewhere beyond Pune, because another of our alumnus had started with NABARD some water harvesting in that village. So there was some sort of a kida which has grown with time. 2000 we all went, we saw those villagers and how they harvested the water, and that country bumpkin is telling me, "Sahib, the pipe hardly." It's his way of telling me that now we are water rich. And as usual, we came back, some 50 of us from Koirikod came to Pune, got into the Shatabdi or whatever, Indrayani. And typically, like all IIT guys, you know, we had long list of things. Kya karna chahiye? You know, and the whole thing at Dadar station, I realized I was better off getting off the train, you know. I kept asking, what do we do next now? And then this talk in 2002 with Rajendra Singh, and when he finished, I got up and I asked everybody, you know, I said, look, this guy has thrown a challenge at us. Let us go and see at least what he's been able to do. And being anti-technology, ever since I got into IIT, I thought it was a very good, sort of a window to look into. So some 30 hands went up, women, faculty, alumni, and unfortunately we couldn't get tickets. There was some jail festival and we had to scratch the entire group, almost the entire group. 6 of us went to Pikampura. This is about 80 or 90 kilometers out of Jaipur, where Ajit Singh has settled down, set up a base. And then we spent 5 or 6 days at that ashram. We went to so many villages, we saw firsthand what was actually done over there. And it was very satisfying and relieving to know that there was minimal use of technology. Of course, that report is up on my website too. But after I came back, and this was in the month of March 2003, where I've seen the third cloud in a zone which gets 10 inches and sometimes 10 centimeters of rainfall. The third crop in the month of March, when I saw that, I said somewhere down the line I missed the bus. I came back, and by the time I was, into what is now probably a sunset industry. In those days, internet, e-business and websites and all used to be looked at as a sunrise industry. So I came back and I decided that all the water that I've drunk, there has to be some way to sort of bring down my level, And it took some time to stop the business and get into this. The transition, if you ask me where was the revenue, I have to tell you it was from solar energy. But now I have got into, like our friend Krishna said, it's not really for profit, it's only for my bread, butter and my little training at the end of the day. I basically give a lot of motivation to people to catch rain. And I also help people to recycle used water. Because let's face it, and this of course I've realized having got into the water, so to speak. We used to keep fighting for rivers, I've done so many of these Ganga Yatras, Gangotri and Jalsangrah. A lot of problems, but essentially there are 3 basic problems with all our rivers: encroachment, pollution, erosion, and the biggest, which we are all party to, is exploitation. And it is over-exploitation. I was explaining to somebody the other day about the sand mining, how the mafia is sucking up all that sand. And it occurred to me that all along you have dal in a katori and you take it out with a spoon and everything was fine in your thali. Now you put a pump, and we have now gone to pulling out water from 1,000 feet. It is going to take hundreds, if not thousands of years to recharge that water source. So anyway, pollution is something that I have been helped by my peers in IIT itself. There's a guy who's sitting in Pune who makes a product called the bar sanitizer. So what I do is I take used water. With so many women, I don't want to tell you in 4-letter words. Plus I'm being recorded, so sewage, silage, and I use the biotechnology and I recycle it. I have done that in my own building to begin with. At the other end of the scale is the Nashik municipal plant, which treats about 108 MLD with the same product, same technology. So that's where the revenue comes from. And essentially, maybe some of you, Himanshu, I've yet to meet Himanshu. You got a mail in the afternoon. Can you see if you can pass it around? We are celebrating the International River Day tomorrow, which is actually, I think, on Monday, but then we don't get Mumbaikars to come on any day. So I thought Sunday might be more convenient. We're going to take some students along the runway of the Mithi River, and then we will collect at the Mine Nature Park, which is actually at Dharavi. So in case the invite doesn't come, you're all welcome to come there. There will be a local poet, not to the quality of Sudas and company, but we manage. He's going to recite some homemade stuff on the Mithi, on rivers. And there is a very interesting band. Maybe some of you have read about them in the newspaper. These Dharavi slum children have collected a whole lot of tins. It's a tin band. Many of us were, followers of jazz, brass band. This is a tin band. Those kids come and they bang all those dabbas and all whatnot, and they create music. Then, of course, what is now, I think, my patent, we have chai biscuit, and we hope to follow that up with a panel discussion on what we can do for the meeting. I think that's reasonably long, Probably more question, I think.
DD, I think.
What is that now? Yeah? Something I missed in my big title.
Questions?
Probably y'all are better, more clear on what I'm doing than I am.
What are you doing with respect to the Mithi River? What is your
Primarily praying. As I told you, those three basic problems. Erosion is not much of a problem for us in wherever we are in our geography here. But encroachment, pollution, and extortion, over exploitation from the Mithi, I think is not in human thinking. Not possible. So basically, I filed some PILs in the court. The last PIL that I filed in the High Court, they threw us onto the Green Tribunal. So that is headed by an ex-Supreme Court judge. So I've got some cases filed for the encroachment. See what these guys have done, MMRDA, they have started to build walls. Now, typically, the logic that they've been putting up in the court is that we don't want the encroachment to come. So the judge asked them, you dodos, you're putting the wall along the length of the river, when you should be putting the wall at 90 degrees to stop the encroachment coming in. Then, they build the wall, they cut out the feet to the mangroves. Now the mangroves need, intertidal, twice they eat and drink. And if you don't provide them, so then MMRDA said, no, you see that 300-meter wall, we've got those 7 pipes. So some of my engineering came into play. I said 7 into pi r square cannot be equal to 300 meters into that height, So now what they do is they'll cut off the supply to the mangroves, they'll eat up the floodplains. Slowly the mangroves die, then they reclaim the mangroves. Next thing you know, you got some, Raija residency or whatever. So this is all part of the, things that work. Encroachment is, everybody knows why encroachment. These are all votes. And you dare not go and say anything there. So ultimately, this is not something that the citizens movement can solve at the slum level. Then, of course, they had started blasting the Mithi last year. I don't know if you heard any noise, but it came in the newspapers. So that was reason enough to stand up and ask MMRDA. But that is the one which has gone to the NGT. So this keeps me fairly busy. I have to keep chasing And these lawyers are a lot like doctors, they don't listen to you. You start telling that it's a lot like our Chatur from the hospital. You tell him, either took that. In fact, he used to give us that advice, rest and pack us off to the hostel. We saved a day's attendance in those days. He got that advice, rest, I don't know, I see many fresh faces. I think now that I'm thinking about the hospital, I should share something with you. Technology and all that. In those days, the trick was you bunked lectures, we went to the hospital. And if you felt sick and you went to the hospital, then you were asked not your ailment, which year? Yellow for first year, green for second year, that's the reason. So that besides the point, I certainly remember. So essentially, that is one part, there is a legal angle which as an individual, as a citizen group, you can't be going there. But I'm also involved with citizens at the street level. See, I have now built up a program. Basically, we take school kids along a certain stretch of the meeting, get the BMC to give us all the support trolleys and trundlers and van and 6 or 7 of those guys. And last year we took about 350 school children. That's one part of 42 school Don Bosco group. So like that, I have been able to tie up with many of these people, and they make the mistake of calling me to talk to the children. So that's when I catch them there. So this year, I hope that we should have the entire, runway square centimeter covered onto a parikrama. Take up the pollution, because right now we are so busy, tackling the government and the government encroachment, the so-called official encroachment. Pollution will be the next thing. As I said, I've been falling back on my batchmates' product. Awareness. Sorry?
Blasting, I have not heard of blasting of the material.
They started near the mine bay and I think somewhere near the upstream from the Vakoda Naga. So ostensibly they said we are deepening the base and increasing the carrying capacity. So I wrote in my affidavit, I said, this is great here. You don't stop the water from rushing down to become flood level. If you stop the water upstairs, then there is no flood problem here. You don't need deeper carrying capacity. Why should you go and fiddle and faddle with the local ecology over there? So that is going on right now. You've got to stay. There is now no more building of walls and other obstacles along the Mithi. There is no more blasting. And this is something that is now, it has come to a head. We had several visits there, court-directed visits, and we put in reports and all that. So nowadays I talk BOD, COD and all that. Kya karega? Zabardasti ho gaya. Then the other thing is we also, as I said, include children, because I have realized that anybody who's over 40 is beyond repair. Especially if you got BTech from IIT. When they call me for all these talks, lands, rotaries and all, they introduce me as this guy's come from IIT, and I'm very quick to point out that look, whatever I learned in IIT, very little, but I'm depositing it back in the Powai lake here. So these are roughly the spectrum of my activities. I suddenly remember this concept about social, what do you call yourself, entrepreneur. Basically, I am a Guju, so this thing of getting into business was part of the BIOS here. But this social entrepreneurship, there is something which is very traditional. Here I am saying, why I am justifying when I said that I am, depositing much of my knowledge in the Powai lake. In the last 5 or 6 years, the kind of knowledge, the kind of grip on the reality, okay, that I have seen in the boondocks, in those country bumpkins, it leaves our departments in the shade. Water engineering, this country has known for thousands of years, and it got disrupted about 200 years back once the British came And then further, the problem has been exacerbated because guys like us learn A for apple and B for ball. So we are tuned now, forced, subject to whatever comes from the West, which is 500, 600 years old. And here we are sitting on a goldmine of knowledge, empirically validated over thousands of years. To come back to this concept about social, not entrepreneurship so much. Anybody who's been around in that Diwali, Lakshmi Puja time, you know, these guys, these business blokes, they write Shubh Labh. And believe me, till 5 years back, when that Gaonwala told me, I didn't know what it implied, or what was the real meaning of Shubh. It is not just good, it is community good. What our ancestors, our forefathers have left behind, the quintessence of life. First, do good for the community. Then love is for your pocket. If you work this way, and I'm very glad I've been around to see you today. And of course, I see the usual suspects. We all work together, Ajit and Vinay. So this is the concept which should drive us. It is not that you get a B.Tech and you get into Capital 1 or 2. Net. When one goes, what is the capital? And in that capital, don't forget, there is a debit balance which goes with you. Kitna pani piya or kitna pani वापस डाला. So I think I have given you more than what you asked for.
I hope you are not referring to Ajit Pawar.
No.
Out of time, there is one last question. Okay.
So I live in Pune.
यार इनके सामने सर मत बोला करो यार. If I tell you how many batches I belong, यार, you will embarrass him यार.
I'm Pune and my building doesn't get PMC supply. We get it from tankers and the borewell.
Remind me to give my card.
That was what I was asking. The water recycling that you said that you implemented in your society, is that water perfectly potable? A. And B, what's the cost of this setup so that we want to bring it to our society so that we have implementation? How much would it probably cost?
I was not feeling for my money, my pen drive. I have a picture of my society's thing. To answer your first question, is it potable? Yes and no, it depends. If you spend 1 rupee, you will get water fit for bathing, gardening, flushing and washing your car. If you spend 3 rupees, you can make it potable. Okay, now to tell you the science behind this, I'll go back to traditional Indian knowledge, which again, as I keep pointing out, I'm in a hurry to point out, I've learned in the last few years. हिंदी में बोलना पड़ेगा, ना देश का इंडिजिनस ज्ञान है. जो पानी बरसात का आता है, इंद्रलोक से आता है, तो उसको इंद्रजल बोलते हैं. जो पानी धरती पे गिरता है, जो बहता है, उसको वरुण जल बोलते हैं. और जो पानी धरती में उतरता है, उसको गंगा जल बोलते हैं. तो जो बायोकेमिस्ट्री नीचे में चल रही है, if you are able to put your used water, get it percolated and into that biochemical factory, you will get it out of your tube well, dug well, bore well, ring well, whatever. So that is the process of purification and the only technology known to mankind. I keep telling everybody, you drink UV water, RO water, XYZ water, it is bad for you. You knock out all the bacteria, how is your system going to digest anything now? We got millions of bacteria running around on our skins and trillions in the stomach. Eureka Forbes is at great pains to tell you, no bacteria, zero. RO takes away all the micronutrients. Now they got version 2. They give you an RO which takes away the original organic micronutrients and then they add inorganic micronutrients. The algebra is still the same. So you can convert that water either using the process available there. This biosanitizer does much the same thing. What? Because you understand my firm grip on technology, you understand how easily I commission these STPs. You take the load, that is your used water, surface well, whatever. You put the biosanitizer, it releases oxygen and it completes the biochemistry along the way. So the first thing that happens is the smell goes. The smell comes because there is organic decay. You stop the pathogens and virus by producing oxygen in that environment, in that load. And then the balance, it gets taken care. I mean, I've had train water compartment. Many times I get off on the platform, there is no water tap, or if there is a tap, there is no water, etc. And I come back to the compartment and I have drunk that water. But I carry the bar sanitizer in my water bottle and I put it back in my mud tub, which I have not boiled BMC water for maybe 12 or 13 years now. So you can convert any water given the right biochemical agents or resources. So you can, at 1 rupee, see we are paying 3 rupees 50 for 1000 liters BMC, domestic. This comes to about 80-90 paise per kiloliter. If you use, and one time you put it, I've got these small STPs, these small hotels, 20 room, 20 kiloliters a day, 40 kiloliters a day. I ensure everything, is set the way I want it. All the pipes are not tanks. I put in the bar sanitizer and I disappear from it. Because it's only when human beings bring the technology and fatal fault and intervene is why we have a problem. So 1 rupee less for secondary usage. And if you want, you can take little more trouble, but you need space and all that. So that you have to work it out. Because there's a building at the other end, Nariman Point. Now they are paying 25 lakh rupees for water. So I told them that it's all right. You give me this space. नहीं वो 3.5 गाड़ी का जगह जाएगा parking. So they're willing to pay 25 lakhs a year. It's all economics. And this is rich economics, not good. What else did you ask me? I thought I missed not B.
No, so you answered both.
You have to give him a card.
I think we can take other questions offline with the snacks. So let's thank Janak. Okay, so the next speaker is Mr. Vinay Somani. Vinay set up Karmayog in 2004 to provide a free networking platform for those interested in social and development sectors. The Karmayog website has a comprehensive online directory of over 20,000 NGOs from all over India and very useful resource sections of 350 civil and social causes. Karmayog has worked closely with government to provide recommendations for policies and procedures, as well as feedback on existing schemes and programs. Recently, Karmayog has undertaken an annual study of corporate social responsibility initiatives for about 400 largest companies, which has led to their effect in getting the new CSR law. So I think Vinay will tell us more about that. Vinay has done his B.Tech from IIT Bombay in 1980. He has done his MBA from Harvard Business School, and he runs his own business. Welcome, Vinay.
Hi everyone. It's really a pleasure to be back on campus. I have not had many opportunities to do so, and it's really brings in the mood and the tempo to see all of you all as well as the campus. When Himanshu and Siddharth they phoned me regarding talking today, I was actually on the point of basically declining them, saying that I don't have anything that I think is substantial to sort of convey in terms of points or insights. So then Deepak and thereafter Himanshu, thereafter Mahendra Kapadia. they called me and Mahendra said, you know, I've been an ardent follower of Karmayog and I didn't know that it was by an IITian, and I think that there'll be a lot that people would enjoy listening to you if you would share your experiences. And at the same time, while I was still vacillating, you know, my wife said, and do you remember that t-shirt that you bought very enthusiastically a few years ago, which you've never been able to wear once because you can't wear it in normal company? So here I am. So let me tell you a little about my department.
That's because you're being recorded. Otherwise you can hear.
Whatever. Is it working now? Yeah?
No, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't. So when I was just on my way, sort of recalling my IIT days, and you know, I was canteen secretary, mess secretary, then GSEC of my hostel, and finally GSEC students affairs. And I remember that in the first or second year at IIT, I was in hostel 2, and someone installed a ceiling fan in the room. And that obviously created a big hangama because everyone was struggling with table fans. You know, table fans itself were difficult. And but then we thought about it, a few friends, and we said, well, it's not so illogical to have a ceiling fan. For one thing, it would be permanent. You know, people don't have to, every batch that comes in doesn't have to buy a fan. And we negotiated with a manufacturer. We found out that we could actually get a very low price. We put that proposal to the institute, and then during summer, we came back pleasantly surprised to find that there were ceiling fans in all the rooms. Similarly, in chemical engineering, probably all departments then, but I speak of chemical engineering. So some of us had calculators, but most of us did not have calculators. And it was such a struggle to do all the exams and solving questions using slide rules and log tables. So we tried to figure out what could be done, because especially in exam time, where as it is one is struggling to answer and then you're struggling with solving it this way. So they actually said, well, if everyone in the class has a calculator, then it's fine. Then we can allow calculators during exams. So around that time, there was a calculator manufacturer who came and gave a talk at, gave a sort of exhibition or set up a stall at the Congo Foyer. And promptly we went to him and said, well, what's the cost of calculator that you can give? What sort of a discount you can give? I don't remember the exact price, but I think it was about 200 rupees, and then we kept on being after him, and he finally said, okay, if everyone buys, we'll give it to you at 50 rupees. And of course, then all of us bought, and then we could use it in exams. I'm not sure if the papers after that became easier or tougher, because so my learning was, and I think that's been the learning for all of us at IIT, that if we really are facing a problem, a situation, we think about it, we are at it, we can actually find a solution. I think that all of us have an innate confidence in our abilities to solve problems, to be able to tackle it. I am reminded of a joke that we used to have, that typical one of a bright American and Chinese and Russian and Indian being called and said, well, there is this exam that you have to prepare for, and it would need you to learn a lot of new concepts, maybe a new sort of language. So how much time would you need? And someone said 1 year, someone said 6 months, someone said 3 months. And of course the Indian, being an IITian, said, oh, just tell me 1 day before the exam. So that's the type of people, right, that we all felt we were. Thereafter, of course, we went out in the real world and we realized that, well, maybe not everyone shares, our idea of our brilliance. You think our spouses married us brilliant, but I think within less than a month of marriage, you can never win an argument. So we face this sort of slow daily attrition in our lives. We find ourselves that, that's okay, we are IITians and we can do it. So why do things like this happen? They happen, I think, because many of us are not people persons. We don't really want to get into situations where we have to be convincing people on the basis of things which we think are not rational, where the discussions are maybe more organic and free flowing. And therefore we sort of try to shy away from trying to convince others of this, even though we have the analytical ability to be able to think of solutions. But my experience at Karmayog has shown that instead of us trying to find support through a peer group, through contacts whom we know, what we should do is we should try to think of a problem, think of a solution, start walking that path, and there will be enough people who would join in on the way, because they would like the solution path that one is moving towards. I think there are some other bottlenecks that at least I have faced, and I just want to share that because I think we have that sort of common background. So one of the things that I have seen is, and maybe that's actually because from the US and maybe from the MBA program there or whatever, is this whole concept of time is money. And as a result of that, I found myself that I had to really unlearn that. In fact, even now I have to remind myself that that's a very wrong concept, because we end up giving so much importance to time rather than giving importance to the value of what we want to do. So we need to really focus on things that are of value to us rather than being worried about how much time it's going to take. Similarly is the concept of money. Money, of course, is required. It has its own place in our lives. But ultimately we have to remind ourselves that money is only a means and not an end. And we should not let these constraints of time and money really get into the way of different things that we can do. We do know that our lives' normal pressures and pulls and problems don't allow us to step back and think like that. But I think that whenever I am in that situation and I think about the days back at IIT, and so invariably when I ask any IITian what is the best period in your life, invariably they say, it was the years that we spent at IIT. So this environment that we have gone through and ourselves experienced, where we didn't have constraints of time and money in our minds when we tried to undertake anything, I think we have to sort of remind ourselves of that and take up things that interest us and move in that direction. So let me now come to Karmayog, some of the initiatives that we've done in Karmayog. I hope everyone has a brochure of Karmayog, and in case you don't, then we have some extra brochures outside. So when I began Karmayog, I had and still have a B2B portal called Find Stone, which is a portal which sort of brings people, buyers and sellers together in the construction stone industry. So it was easy for us to try to think of developing software which would match, on the one hand, NGOs who are already working on different social causes, and match them with people like us who are volunteers or who would like to get involved in one way or the other, offering services, hopefully money or materials or just their time. And we found that within a year we had a very good response, and in fact now, as of now, we have nearly 4,000 volunteers registered in Mumbai, as well as 25,000 NGOs from all over India, including 1,500 which are in Mumbai alone. So what I would like to stress is, it was a very simple step that we took. It didn't cost us much. There was no meaningful cost apart from a hosting cost of the website, which is not that much. And slowly we saw in the space of a year that we became such a vibrant NGO directory, which also enabled all these NGOs who are in different parts of the country, working in isolation, not knowing whom to contact, what to do, but this could create an ecosystem for them. The next year, in 2005, was when the floods hit Mumbai, right? Because of the rain, because of all the downpour. And fortuitously, it turned out that this database, which we had, which was all the NGOs, so many working here, all the volunteers who were working here, as well as the forms where people could phone in and say, you know, I need this, or how can I help with this, it all came in use. And as we worked with the BMC disaster cell, we realized that actually government, BMC or Mantralaya, doesn't have such a system for disasters. So we got involved in being part of the coordination committee. And what we did was, with the media, with BMC, with people from Mantralaya, from the disaster management cell, from those NGOs who were working in different wards in Mumbai, and ourselves, we formed this NGO coordination cell. And we realized that it was very, very effective, because just so much information could be disseminated. Otherwise, there was only limited information, and that was of a particular type, which was being conveyed through TV or through the newspapers, and that was dated. You know, it was late. So to me, it was amazing that just something as simple as that, which did not really take either money or effort, could lead to something which is of so much value. The next step after that was that we realized that there should be a group which could basically get activated immediately when some disaster strikes. Because we could see in the first 3-4 days, and that's the time when everything is critical, we could see that it was very difficult for government, for citizens, for any organization to actually mobilize themselves and things. So we formed an NGO council, where basically we identified who are the leading NGOs in different areas, whether it's to do with, let's say, garbage collection, or with cancer, or the mentally challenged, or the physically challenged, or working with animal welfare, or whatever. Everyone who had been working in their area, and we formed this NGO council. And then we went to BMC and we said, okay, here we are all together, and we would like to engage in a more formal way. Would you sign an MOU with us? And to our delight and surprise, they agreed. So we actually formed an MOU for for good governance. And once again, I'm sitting and thinking and saying, my God, how easy it is. If you think through it, you put together a proper plan, you can actually achieve things which can have so much impact. Thereafter, under this NGO Council and BMC sort of interactions and the MOU, what we did was we looked at, okay, what was the basic cause, for instance, of all the problems that had occurred during the flooding time. And everyone was in consensus that one major problem was the collection of solid waste. And so we all grappled with that and tried to think, okay, what could be done? And we found it interesting that in 1999, so that's 6 years before this flooding had happened, the Supreme Court had actually given a judgment which said that every municipal corporation in the country has to have a set of rules for how they deal with solid waste. And not a single one, including Mumbai, had actually ever framed the rules. So we sort of initiated a whole rounds of discussions within BMC, within ourselves, between BMC and other stakeholders, which would be recyclers, rag picker organizations, all sorts of different people, whether they had a commercial interest or an expertise or were just keen or could contribute to this whole sort of area. And in a few months, 4 or 5 months, we actually came out with the solid waste rules for the city, which have been duly notified, which are the existing rules today. I need to just sort of break for water, sorry. Thereafter, we worked for a year with the Anti-Corruption Bureau. We engaged into a program, a formal program again, valid for a year, which was the Mumbai Pact Against Corruption. And once again, in that, basically we had meetings of people who had experienced corruption, were interested in taking up some initiatives to mitigate it and work with the Anti-Corruption Bureau. And it was very interesting to see that there could be very simple solutions. One, for instance, which was tried out was the ACB started a mobile van. That van would go and every week would actually stand outside a government office and over there would explain what ACB does, and if anyone had a complaint, then they could register a complaint there and then or understand the procedure of doing so. And of course, mostly what was achieved was, at least in that 1 week, that department worked much more nicely. So that was the learning. So there were a lot of learnings like this, which we, on our side in Karmayog, converted that into forms. For instance, we have a form where people can give a suggestion or a complaint to BMC on any issue. We have a form where across the country anyone can complain about corruption. There have been hundreds, if not thousands of people who have filled these various forms. What we do is these forms are publicly displayed on the website. We send them to BMC. We also send them to other government offices wherever possible. And quite often people have had success in terms of getting some or the other problem resolved. We've done, after that, what we try to do in Karmayog is we try to see how different stakeholders of society can get involved and what should be their role, etc. So we understood a little about government and how it works. We understood about the NGO sector, about citizens who on their own are very passionate, and we said, well, but what about corporates? So we started looking at what do corporates do in anything which is sort of beyond business. So whether it is charity or they are working in their community, etc. And we started analyzing or trying to get data of what are the CSR activities, the corporate social responsibility initiatives of the 500 largest companies in India. And we put all that information out in the public domain, which is our website. And we also started rating them. We felt, well, for whatever it's worth, let us do an attempt of rating them on a scale of 0 to 5. The first year when we began, I think more than 50% were not doing anything, so it was just straight 0. And very few, no one was in the category of 5, and maybe very few people were in the 4. But we did this for 4 years, and our study being very well received internationally among those who are involved in this field of CSR or investors. There are many investors who want to be careful about what companies they invest into, as well as many constituents in India itself. And we think that our study has been a very big contributory factor towards this law which has now come into place, which was also our recommendation right from the very beginning, that a company must spend 2% of its profit in CSR type of activities. We've done some other initiatives on the way which are also ongoing initiatives. For instance, we have a book donation drive. Essentially, we try to tell people is please don't throw away any book, any language, any subject, any matter. I think in a poor country like India, or maybe any country, it's criminal to be throwing away books or not, or just even keeping them at home because you paid a lot for it. While on the other hand, there are enough people, enough students, senior citizens, public libraries where such type of books will just not have. There will be no access to such type of books. So what we do is we invite people to tell us what books they have. We share that information through a large online discussion group that we have of 65,000 people. And if it's possible, then we try to collect the books and then sort them out. If we know NGOs who can sort of deal with those books. And as a result of that, we've seen that, for instance, Rotary last year, they really liked the idea. They ran that as a joint initiative, and in 1 week, we ourselves got 25,000 books. So we are seeing that all the things that we've done, and that's actually my message for all of us today, which is that we've taken steps which are extremely simple. They're easy to do. They don't require much time and money. And the impact of that is absolutely unbelievable. So what I would like to urge each and every one of us here is, think of anything that bothers you and please start getting involved with that from tomorrow. We are there to support any initiatives. We are always looking for initiatives to support because we have this vibrant ecosystem. We know people in the same field or similar field, and we can just connect you all together, and we ourselves would love to get involved. I am reminded of what President Kalam said in Pan IIT at 2006, right, at Bandra, where he said, of course, that IITians are the best that India has to offer. But what he said, which really struck me, is that he says that we should really try, meaning IITians and IIT should really try to ensure that there is a little bit of IIT in every Indian. And so I would urge all of you all, take up something because we have got so much that we can offer that by us taking up things, we will be able to fulfill, this point that Dr. Kalam tried to make to all of us, which is spread things to the world. I want to end by saying that one regret that I had and have is that I didn't start Karmayog much earlier. And the reason for that was that I was thinking, well, I'm looking up and I'm saying, well, so-and-so person's done so much, so-and-so person's done this in business, they've achieved this, etc. And so I should wait till I achieve more, till I get more, or whatever. And then one day I realized, and this was at a traffic signal where I was just waiting and looking around, I said, I'm wasting my time looking up. If I just look around, there are all these innumerable people who can benefit so much just from what I have to offer. And that actually was when I took me on the path of Karmayog. Thank you for listening.
Thanks a lot, Vinay. That was really inspiring. If you have any questions.
The guy bringing the mic. Tell me this 2%, I have not interacted with you for such a long time. How did this figure of 2% come for CSR? Is there any basis?
No basis. No basis. We just thought it's a logical figure. 1% is too less, 5% is too much.
You know what Kalam said, you didn't mention the best thing that he said is replacing remove. He said you put in steel, you get metal. So what I'm asking is you put in metal and you get some product you sell. But what about the replacement cost? No.
Actually, all that has to figure. The point is you need to start. So that's the way.
Okay, Vinay.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Last but not the least, we have all been waiting with bated breath. We all know Dr. Ajit Ranade. He's a well-known economist, columnist. We have seen him on Kaun Banega Crorepati, News Hour, and he is on different channels. So all of us know him really well. So I cannot run through his entire resume. So I just say a few things. Ajit Ranade today will focus on his NGO called Association of Democratic Reform. He is the co-founder and trustee of that. Recently, India has been instrumental in the CIC judgment to bring political parties under RTI, and the petition to the Supreme Court to bar MPs and MLAs were conducted by the Court of Law. Now we have all seen that has been in the news, and I don't know what's going to happen to that ordinance, but we are all observing that live. So that's area. He'll tell more about area today. He also leads the economic cells of Aditya Birla Group. He's the former chair of IIT Bombay Alumni Association. He is a member of Advisory Council of IIT. He is also on several RBI and CII committees. He has engaged in past with World Bank and with Planning Commission. He is a distinguished alumnus awardee and a distinguished service awardee as well. He is an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad and PhD in economics from Brown University. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. This is just an evening to have an interaction, and you have so many back-to-back. It was like a back-to-back lecture format. So let's just break the lecture format and keep it interactive with your permission.
Yeah.
So we can do it a Q&A. Seriously, I mean, so I'll speak
sure.
for about 10 minutes and then we should have a Q&A. Fortunately, I didn't realize the timing was such that only yesterday this thing was in the news. There were two big pieces of news. Of course, there were many other pieces of news. There are many pieces of news, but the big ones which unfortunately grabbed the headlines was one where Mr. Rahul Gandhi, who is the Vice President of the Congress Party, which is the dominant member of the current coalition, UPA, which is the government, suddenly, without any pre-planned, supposedly landed up in front of the press and said something like this ordinance which has been sent by the cabinet to the president for signing for his assent is nonsense. It should be thrown out, it should be thrown out. So that was a big, news because he belongs to the Congress party, as I said, he's the vice president, so the number 2 guy in the party. And his party is the major major component of the ruling coalition. Actually, we should not use the word ruling coalition. Our government which is in office, they don't rule us. 2-minute digression, this is important. In 1947, when India became independent, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru became the Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister of the country. And one of his instructions to his Congress party workers was to go to the length and breadth of the country to tell the people of India that they were now free. They had got independent. The Britishers had left, and of course Swaraj Milaya. So this is so the story goes that when these Congress workers, party workers, used to go to the remote areas, the Britishers are left. So the standard response used to be, "Acha, the Britishers are left. Who is going to rule us now?" So we still call it. So nobody needs to rule us. Actually, we are the bosses, and the system is there in office. They are holding office, and so anyway. So Mr. Rahul Gandhi, Vice President, comes and says, and the reason it is very big news is because he is member of this party, which is part of the government, and by saying that this an ordinance is a law which is passed without consulting Parliament, which is without going through the Parliament process, and it is done only in extreme emergency. In fact, there's lots of things to relate to because you mentioned President Kalam. There's a story of an ordinance exactly about 10 years ago, which was written up in Fundamentals. I think there's a nice story about again ADR's involvement with President Kalam. Same story. Cabinet had passed an ordinance, and citizens groups had urged the president not to sign this ordinance, and the President Kalam had returned the ordinance back to the 2002 August. He had returned the ordinance back to the cabinet led by Prime Minister Vajpayee to urge him to either cancel the ordinance, withdraw it, or modify it. And without even 1 day delay, at that time the country also had a deputy prime minister, which is Mr. Krishna. He was still here and was the convener of NDA today. So they returned the ordinance back to President Kalam, and it was exactly on the same thing. It was something about disqualification of elected people to parliament and legislature, Vidhan Sabha. and President Kalam signed it, of course. So it's like deja vu. 11 years later, in 2013, we have a cabinet, we have UPA, not NDA, sending an ordinance to the president, which nobody likes. Everybody thought it was, actually it was, absolutely, shocking that they it was like riding roughshod over public opinion, to send an ordinance to say that we provide immunity to convicted MPs and MLAs. This is the law, because Supreme Court had passed a judgment back in July saying that if you are convicted, that is if you have been convicted of a serious crime, even if you are a sitting MP or an MLA, you lose your seat instantly, automatically. But this immunity they gave back to those sitting MPs and MLAs by passing an ordinance. They wanted to pass this law in Parliament. As you know, Parliament has law-making authority, and Supreme Court or the courts only have law interpreting authority. The courts only interpret the law for you and pass judgments. The courts cannot make new laws. And if the Supreme Court judgment is something that perhaps is not acceptable or something, then you make laws to defeat the judgment. But this doesn't happen usually. I mean, this is a rare case. The most celebrated case is, of course, Shah Banu case. And some people think that Shah Banu led to opening the doors of the mosque, and the next 20 years of India's complete change of national character, debate and discourse. But there have been other smaller cases, like for example, this case of Vodafone. The Vodafone was fighting an income tax case for almost 6 years. Vodafone is a company which came late to the party. It was the last comer to India's telecom revolution, and it decided to buy a company called Hutchison. Remember Hutch, it used to be Hutch Orange. And it paid a whopping amount of $20 billion for this transaction. But most surprisingly, there was zero income tax. They paid zero TDS. You know what is TDS? So they paid zero, no tax was paid, no tax was withheld. So of course this litigation went on and on and on. And finally it went to the Supreme Court. So it started with the income tax tribunals, the Bombay High Court, eventually Supreme Court. And they got a judgment which, just to very simplistically saying, they actually won the case. Of course, the same Vodafone is now buying, has sold or bought Verizon.
Sold
to her. So therefore they have got money now. In this case, Vodafone was paying money to Hutchison. So Vodafone was a buyer in India. In the US, Vodafone is a seller. So it's got some $140 billion, some huge amount. And it's exactly in the same case. Now UK has found that it can't tax Vodafone. So the same case is going on there, but there's no complaint there. They want to give tax. But here, there's human right. Anyway, the relation to this story is that, so the government of India, in its finance bill, that is the law which is passed every February or March, which is called the budget, passed a law defeating the Supreme Court judgment, which is called retroactive amendment to the tax laws to make it law. Because the Supreme Court case that the Vodafone people had won was on the basis of an older existing law. Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not going into the details. But anyway, back to this. So yesterday's two pieces of news were that Mr. Rahul Gandhi comes and says that this ordinance is bogus, nonsense. And the shocking thing is that he's saying, by saying that, he is actually going against his own government. So and he says that we make these compromises with corruption and this should stop. So implying as if the cabinet, led by the Prime Minister, was making compromises with corruption to pass this ordinance. So it was a very big news. It's never happened. Actually, Mr. Manmohan Singh as Prime Minister has got undermined many times. For example, he was opposed to the food security bill, he was opposed to something. But that was, legitimate dissent and debate. But this kind of direct insubordination has not happened. So that was the big news. But the other big news was that Supreme Court passed a judgment in a case saying that this negative vote. Actually, negative is not the right way to say it, because it's
abstention.
Say that it's none of the, it's the blank vote. Or Marathi is called napasanti se button. So it is actually, strictly speaking, it is right to abstain. Meaning, suppose you don't want to vote for anybody in a ballot, in the election. You can just stay at home or go on a holiday. Nobody is stopping you because it's not, India doesn't have compulsory voting. You just go But what happens is if you don't go to vote, there is a risk that somebody else may vote on your behalf or impersonating you and commit a fraud, and this is quite possible. So what used to happen in the olden days when we had paper ballot is that you could just go to the voting booth and fold the paper ballot and stuff it in the box, and that was your blank vote. So your attendance is tick marked, you voted, nobody else, and you voted for nobody. In the EVM era, which is now almost 20 years old, there is no button. So there is no mechanism to do this. So the only way to do it is what is called to sign your name in a register and fill out a form called 49O. I'm sure those of you are on internet must have seen 49O, a lot of talk. The 49O is not a vote of protest or right to reject. It is actually simply registering your attendance or registering your abstention. But what happened is that because you had to fill out a form, it violated the secrecy of the ballot. So basically, it was a fundamental principle that India's adult franchise is one of the key features is secrecy of the ballot. So the 49O was actually violating the secrecy of the ballot in the EVM era. It didn't happen in the paper ballot era. So the Supreme Court judgment was only on this narrow technicality. They have interpreted the law and found that 49O violates constitutional principle. But of course, in the headlines you see India, Anna Hazare made this popular about right to reject 2 years ago. So what we really want is the logical next step is that once now so all EVMs will get a compulsory button called the nota button, none of the above button. Somebody said in IIT style typical, multiple choice, let there be an all of the above option also. IIT को कोई छोड़ नहीं सकता. All of the above will not be there, only nota button will be there. And the next logical step is that nota should be counted. See, right now nota is in register. It's just an invalid vote. Yeah. So now the next step is that nota should be counted. If nota is counted and if that vote gets maximum number of meaning votes, so that means that nota should be declared a winner, which means that so they should have a re-election, which means that in the re-election none of the other candidates should be allowed to contest because they have been rejected by the electorate. So there should be a fresh election with new candidates, and of course you don't have this ad infinitum loop. You can in the second stage you can have no nota button, or you can have a thing that the winner should win 50% vote or something like that. And if otherwise have a runoff, simple runoff between the top two or something in the third round. But those rules have to be discussed and formulated by Parliament. But if that happens, then you really have pressure. That means that what happens is that there's a lot of apathy or fatigue or cynicism about the candidates because often they have criminal background, they are known crooks, they are gundas, or people just don't think they have the right public service record. So people stay away from elections. But in urban areas especially, I mean, we know some parts of Bombay which have very low attendance. So that 15, 18, 20% voting. So hopefully what will happen is this will put pressure on political parties to put up better candidates, and that is the bigger thing about this news. So then it will be a genuinely right to reject button. But what we have got, so it's a long journey. So step by step. So I think logically they are going to be forced to count the number of votes, and logically hopefully somebody will move this thing that what happens if the nota button wins. So actually this is the area that ADR has been working in for the last about 13-14 years. And initially what we did was focused on approaching the courts to ask the election commission, because we work in the area of broadly two areas, electoral reforms and political party reforms. And today ADR is as an organization, is a small organization registered as a non-profit trust. It has about 25-30 employees. Main office is in Delhi. But we work with a lot of regional partners. So All India network of more than 1,000 NGOs. And mainly the activity is, as I said, in the two broad areas, electoral reforms and political party reforms. Electoral reforms was initially all about transparency. That is to get to know your candidates. Before 1999, if you wanted to stand for elections, all you needed was to be minimum age 25 your father's name or your husband's name, and your party's name, I think. That's all you have to fill out a form and then you can start for it. So absolutely no information was required to be disclosed. So we kind of went to court saying that the election commission must get compulsorily collect more information about candidates. Main concern was about criminality. What was happening is that if you go back to the Bombay riots of 1993, around that time there was an NN Vora committee. There was a lot of talk about criminal nexus in the Bombay riots case itself between politicians and the mafia or the underworld. But even before that, so this nexus between criminals and politicians has a much older history. And over a period of time, then of course Prime Minister VP Narasimha Rao was also indicted, if you remember. There was the urea scam. Then of course there was Bofors before that. So this concern that there was more and more influence of criminals or muscle power on elections was growing. But until 1999, no such law was there which made the candidates declare that they have criminal cases pending against them. So we went to court, and luckily for us, we won this case. But then it went to Supreme Court. Actually, the Election Commission was the respondent in that case. So the Election Commission was secretly quite happy, because if you know, the Election Commission is only a body which conducts, whose main responsibility is to conduct free and fair elections. They cannot make new laws. So they didn't unilaterally push for this criminals this disclosure. So armed with this judgment, they were very happy, but the government of India appealed against it. The government of India then was ruled by NDA, as you know. NDA was in office. NDA was in office. So the case was ADR versus Election Commission. ADR wins. And then Government of India appeals against you can, by the way, I don't know, this was kind of news to me of that. X is filing a lawsuit against Y, and X wins, then Z can go to court appealing against it. So something here happened. They went to Supreme Court, and that case also, luckily for us, we won. And by that time, all the parties had jumped into the fray. Not just the government, but all the parties, political parties. But luckily, that second judgment also we won in May 2002. There was an emergency meeting called by the then Law Minister Venkaiah Naidu, and all 21 or 22 political parties from the opposition as well as their coalition attended and unanimously passed a resolution that yes, Supreme Court judgment ko defeat karna hai. Therefore, this ordinance was passed in August 2002, and it was that time it was a recess. That is, Parliament was in recess, and it was in recess because it was adjourned sine die. You know what is sine? It's some Latin word that we learned. Sine die. Not to be confused with the sine curve. Then there is no cause sine die. So that sine die was because there was something called the petrol pump scam, and the petrol pump scam goes back to Captain Satish Sharma and the petrol pump allotments. Then Mr. Ram Naik was involved. I'm just saying all this because by a strange coincidence, the lawyer who found the petrol pump scam in the Supreme Court was the same lawyer who worked with us in this case area. So there is a lot of interesting stories like this. So therefore this ordinance was sent by Mr. Vajpayee's cabinet to President Kalam, and all of us went to meet President Kalam on 16th of August 2002, just one day after the Independence Day. Please read about it in the Fundamentals magazine. This is my story. And he listened to us. He was very, very patient, very sympathetic. He said, yes, I understand. We said that this new ordinance, you know what the new ordinance said? That the disclosure about criminal cases will be only to the Speaker of the House, and no citizen of India will have any right ever to question or ask. Remember, this is 2002. The right to information law came in 2005 October. We're talking about 99 to 2002. So the right to information law had not come yet. But the principle was the same, that the citizens have a right to know. And so Mr. Kalam understood all this, and he said, yes. And he promptly returned the ordinance back to the cabinet. And the cabinet, of course, turned it back and sent it back without even changing a comma. Now, in the Indian scheme of things, the president does not have power to override after that. You either have to sign, or the other option is to just sit on it and just delay and wait for the parliament to die. In every 5 years parliament, as you know, there is a sunset. And then of course that ordinance has an automatic set, so then you have to have a new ordinance. But I don't think Mr. Kalam was of that kind of person. You know, he's a more proactive person. So he said, okay, we'll fight. So because of that, we had to go to the Supreme Court a third time, challenging the constitutionality of that ordinance. And luckily for us, again, we won. That was March 13, 2003. So that judgment attained finality because it was then related to Article 19 of the Constitution, which is right to life and freedom of speech and all that. Article 19 is about freedom of speech, and Article 21 is right to life. And these first few articles of the Constitution, as you know, we call them fundamental rights. So now this new Supreme Court judgment of March 2003, you can also defeat that. As I said, Parliament has the power to pass new laws, but to defeat a judgment based on constitutional principles, on fundamental rights, or first few articles like Article 19, then you need a special amendment where 2/3 of Lok Sabha and 2/3 of Rajya Sabha have to vote. And it has to pass not with a simple majority, but with a 2/3 majority. And by then, as you know, by March 2003, this issue had become an national issue. Many people in the media, in fact, political parties also. So by 2003 March, when the judgment came, you had the president of the Congress party, Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, saying publicly, "We welcome this judgment." So by then, the mood had changed. The politicians had changed their view about this or whatever. And since then, what we have been doing is that the big thing about this judgment is that politicians now have to submit in writing on a sworn affidavit, image or whatever. That is, they have to give their background, all the details of the criminal cases pending against them. Now the thing is that people know, but once it's a sworn affidavit, then we can simply disseminate or distribute this information because it cannot attract libel or defamation suit. Otherwise, somebody can. In fact, we did have that experience. Earlier, you can be sued for defamation. But this thing, by simply publicizing information on a sworn affidavit, that was the key instrument. If you just want to ask me what was the key tool that we focused on, why this sworn affidavit is important. And by the way, in Indian law, filing a false affidavit, you can go to jail for 2 years. The punishment for, if you're found that you filed a false affidavit, then you can, you mentioned quite a few affidavits, so filing a false affidavit. So what has happened is that now, over a period of time, since we have been conducting this election watch activity. So election watch activity is about compiling this information. Each candidate typically has whatever, 10, 12, 15 pages of affidavit. In fact, one of the main activists in this, who helped us is also sitting here. Nathan is here, so he knows about this. So there's a big challenge because you get to know about the information about candidates only about 10 days before election. Now each affidavit may be 8 to 10 pages long, and it could be in the local language, Marathi, Kannada, whatever. And then it is sometimes not legible. So that has to be converted into digital data. So there's a lot of data entry involved, and then it has to be summarized. Then it has to be distributed. Then it has to be basically the voters have to get to know in a much simpler form. If you just explain it in legalese, so this person has charges under section 304D of Indian Penal CRPC, attempted murder, rape, extortion, kidnapping. So that is what we do. I mean, we convert the legalese language into something which people can understand, and then in English, yes. And that's the activity of election watch. So what we basically purpose is to get information out to the voters. Luckily for us, over the years, the media has started on its own helping us a lot. So actually earlier we had to struggle and beg and plead to please publicize the information. Or then we have of course internet, electronic and print media. And of course now the Election Commission itself has been very, very proactive and very helpful, very cooperative. So they put up this information on the website. So what we have done is we have actually gone and so we have to show this video. So what we do now is we also try to get it out. See, the big revolution in India is telecom. As I said, 850 million people in India have cell phones. So they may not have access to internet yet. The website, by the way, is adrindia.org, and the information cumulatively now we have got about 62,000 So anybody who has stood for elections in India, either for MLA, that is Lok Sabha, I mean Vidhan Sabha or Lok Sabha, has okay, wait, so anybody who has stood for elections in the last 10 years, his information is captured here, and that information is straight away from the sworn affidavit. Please, we don't add or subtract anything. It is from the sworn affidavit. So the cumulative, we have data on 62,000 people. There are a lot of habitual standers. People have a habit of standing for elections. But that is a good thing for us, because if you stood for election in 2004 and you stood again in 2009, we can compare your affidavits. We know how much your assets have increased by. So there are lots of these very famous politicians whose assets have gone up by 1000%. But stock market went up only by 30%. So ye kaise hua? So anyway, so these questions can be raised. As of now, the Election Commission does not ask you for your source of income. They only have, so what they have here to file is your assets, your liabilities, most importantly, all your pending criminal cases and educational qualification. So, as I said, the election watch activity is in terms of spreading this information, mostly asking people to vote. And asking people like us, we have a responsibility first of all that we should vote ourselves. How many of you? I will not ask them. But we have to vote. Each person has to make 10 other people vote. So actually this multiplier is important. By the way, in states like smaller states, Uttarakhand, Manipur, right? Mizoram has elections now, but which was the election in the last? Uttarakhand, Manipur. उसके पहले Bengal, Arunachal, Himachal. So all of them, Pondicherry, they have all been recording 85% voting percentage, 80-85%. So actually, it's only states like bigger states like Maharashtra which have a lower. Even Maharashtra state overall has 55%, but Mumbai city has not been able to cross 40-45%. So imagine what happens is that if you have a constituency where 50% people are going to vote, and if you have typically 4 candidates, who each of the 4 think they are strong candidates, then 50 divided by 4, if they are all close neck to neck hoga, so 50 divided by 4 is 12.5. So किसी को अगर 13% vote मिलता है, 13.5% vote, they win. But a 13% vote means 87% people don't like this candidate. And this 13% you can then appeal on very narrow base of caste or religion, or we can appeal to the so-called strong base or Tea Party type. Just consolidate your strong base, just focus on that, and those guys are so committed that they'll come out and vote. So they're 13%. But that just defeats the purpose of representation. If you want to call this person a people's representative, you can't have a 13% vote and call him a people's representative. Okay, now I'm done. Because let me just show you this one video clip, and then actually I didn't give you a chance to ask questions, but please butt in. So what we do now is that we have to reach out to the people. So in the urban areas, the only message is please go out and vote. In rural areas, because rural percentage is quite high, that rural area ka main message is please don't accept money, don't sell your vote. Mera vote bikaw nahi hai. They're very difficult to convince. Actually, people say that at least once in 5 years we get this 1,000 rupee note. And when you do this direct benefit, cash benefit, usme zero leakage hai. Mr. Rajiv Gandhi apparently had said, Rajiv, not Rahul, he had said that out of every 100 rupees, only 15 rupees reach the poor. But election में जो पैसा मिलता है 100% आता है. So for urban voters, please go out and vote. For rural voters, please don't sell your vote. Now the reason for that is because they say, and this is a real conversation, you can try it out with people that especially from lower incomes. Typically if people come as domestic help, housemaid help. आपको इलेक्शन में पैसा मिलता है क्या? हाँ मिलता है. कितना मिलता है? So nowadays about 1,000 rupees I think they get. And it is given just on the previous day or 2 days earlier. I'm not referring to the sharab and liquor and biryani or something. तो 1,000 रुपया मिलता है. कौन देता है? पार्टी वाले देते हैं. Very nice, पैसे. ये पैसा कहाँ से आता है? पैसा तो गवर्नमेंट से आता है. Government typically. अच्छा, गवर्नमेंट से आता है. नहीं गवर्नमेंट का नहीं है, तो हाउ कैन गवर्नमेंट गिव ब्लैक मनी? ये एक्चुअली वो पार्टी से आता है। ओ अच्छा, तो वो लीडर जो कैंडिडेट आपको देता है, तो वो क्यों देता है? सोशल सर्विस कर रहा है क्या? Why is he so kind to you? No, not kind, but to उसको he must be giving because he must be getting it from the government. So then you kind of you have to have this conversation कि अच्छा ये आपके इलाके में how is the infrastructure, you know, roads, toilets, एकदम बेकार है, सब भ्रष्टाचार है, सब all corruption. So then you say, by the way, if this guy is giving you 1,000 rupees, why do you think he is giving you 1,000 rupees to get elected? So he is going to make 10 times that money from the contractors. So the government of India has plenty of money to fix your toilets and your little roads and tap water. But because you are giving money and participating in this loop, X becomes 10X. All that money that is legitimately coming should come to you is going away. So you see this logic is so convoluted, people can't see the connection between selling their vote and the eventual corruption and the lack of infrastructure or development. Even, you know, it's a very sophisticated argument, I think. So we are trying to build this nexus because the big challenge for Indian elections is that muscle power and money power. So Bahubali, but muscle power, at least we don't see the old kind way. You don't have people like Raja Bhaiya in Mumbai city at least with guns and everything. But this money power menace is very high. And additional to money power challenge is now this whole business of paid media. But we don't have time for all this. So what we do is we through telephones and SMSs we try to send this message. So we had in the last election in 2009, I think. 2009. What is this? We had this kind of messages. Is the audio connected? ऐसा कुछ करना है मुझे।
अपने बच्चों का भविष्य कितने में बेचेंगे आप? क्या कीमत लगाएंगे? एक बोतल शराब, एक बोरी गेहूं, रेडियो, टीवी, एक साड़ी या 2-4 हजार रुपए? सोच लीजिए, क्योंकि फिर आ रहे हैं वो कुछ उम्मीदवार आपका वोट खरीदने। याद रखिए, आज जो आपका वोट खरीदेगा वो कल आपको बेचेगा। इस बार एक बात तय कर कि जो भी उम्मीदवार हमारा वोट खरीदने की कोशिश करेगा उसे तो हम हरगिज वोट नहीं करेंगे। अपने देश का सौदा, अपने बच्चों के भविष्य का सौदा हम हरगिज नहीं करेंगे। सच्चे को चुनेंगे, अच्छे को चुनेंगे। जय हिंद।
Thank you. Anybody above 40, so actually the big appeal is that you go out and in Maharashtra, 21 lakh people turn 18 every year. We are going to have elections after 5 years. This is from 2009 to 2014. So 21 lakh into 5, almost 1 crore. So 1 crore new voters are out there. You have to ensure some way to get these guys to register as voters first and then go out and vote. So,
questions?
Suppose we make an effort to make a voting compulsory, then all this.
No, sorry, I am going to cut you short. Sorry about that. Okay. Voting compulsory करना है मतलब if you don't vote then you have committed a breach of law. That means a case has to be initiated against you. FIR, police has to file a FIR. You just go to court and you go and appear in court. India has some 3.24 crore court cases pending in various courts. If 50% voting होता है, means 50% people are criminals by not voting, compulsory voting में. So India का population is 1.2 billion. 750 million people are voters. 375 million Mr. Modi or whoever, all these people talking about compulsory voting, it is not doable. It's not practical. Because a lot of people are not going to vote. By not voting, you're committing a breach of law.
Then you
So
can't
how?
stand.
Huh?
You can't stand.
The standing ka chodo, he's talking about.
Because you haven't voted, you cannot stand because now you are a criminal.
No, he's talking about compulsory voting. In Australia or somewhere they say there's compulsory voting. We will come to that stage. But not tomorrow, not this year. So sorry, I wanted to, because this is this compulsory voting is, yesterday only I saw Modi's reaction. Arey great, ये नोटा बटन आ गया, अभी compulsory voting होना चाहिए इंडिया में. You know, this is like that Swiss black money. I have to take 2 minutes on this. There was a senior BJP leader, Mr. Gopinath Modi. He had a speech here just a couple of months ago. He said, in 2009 elections, their election limit according to the law was 25 lakh rupees, but I spent 8 crores. Then he said, "Arey, idhar koi election money commission se koi aaya kya?" There are 3,000 people, okay? And he was bade shaan se bola usne. Now he said, because that I need to spend that kind of money to win elections. So let us take 8 crore as 5 crore though. I told you that there are 543 seats in parliament, typically 10 people every constituency. So 5,000 people stand for one election for Lok Sabha. Actually 8,000 stood in 2009, 8,000 is the number. So even if they spend 5 crores each, or 4 crores, 8,000 into 4 kitna hota hai? 32,000 crores. Okay. By definition it is illegal. Because 25, by definition, in fact Mr. Konde also said it publicly. And then immediately got a notice from election commission, please explain. And he said, no, I say a joke mara or something. So there is 32,000 crores, may say 90% is illegal. Now multiplied by so many elections, India is always in election mode. So this black money is here. So, but you always have this red herring, let's go chase the black money in Swiss banks. So this is like exactly, this is a red herring. It may be there, I'm sure Swiss bank may be thought of. The big elephant is here. Same thing about this compulsory voting. I think it's a red herring. बहुत सारा debate होगा, then the real issues will थोड़ा सा get sidelined. I feel. Sorry to be so emotional about it.
Sir, I really appreciate that you've had so much, made so many efforts and had so much success in reforms.
It's all small steps.
Yeah. So this is an incremental approach. Yeah. But my question is, what do you feel about the fundamental system? So do you think that there are things which, by definition, the way the constitution is arranged, we cannot reform because it's the lawmakers themselves who are in charge?
No. So what we feel is that the law, the kind of people we have in parliament or in state legislatures or even in say corporation, Mumbai corporation, municipal corporation or panchayats, we have to put a higher bar. See, by the way, India is the only country in modern times, probably in history, who gave adult franchise from day one. There is no other country which did it, and no other country is likely to do it. And such a large country, the population of India then was 350 million, 300 million. And it was ridiculed, it was poo-pooed, it was said ki, so there was no, for example, a lot of people felt there should be at least some literacy test, minimum 10 standard pass to be voting. In America, it was landlords. You have to be a landlord to be able to vote. First of all, only whites, only males, and only landlords. Back 1776, they say the oldest, modern democracy, the biggest democracy is America, or rather, whatever, oldest. But initially, only males, only landlords, only whites. Dhire, बढ़ता गया, then non-landlords, and at some point they thought, oh, there are women also. So 1920s or something, there was a long agitation for the women franchise, and only 1960s blacks got to vote. So 1770s उनको मिला freedom, in 1960s तक चल रहा था. Whereas India in 1947, day one, we gave adult franchise to everybody. But because of that, that's the challenge. You have educated, uneducated, rich, poor, Hindu, Muslim. So I think you are talking about reforms means really the reform, the aim is to try and get better quality people in as lawmakers.
Just to follow up.
There's no JE for parliament, so.
No, so, but we still have the system where, okay, it's first past the post, right? So even if 100% people vote, if the candidate wins 23% and if he wins, he is through to the parliament. But if you want to reform those kind of things, then
yeah. See, this is the. I'll be less emotional about this than the compulsory voting. So when we have to solve, pura India ko solve karte hain. This first past the post. What he's saying is that currently in our system, the person who gets the maximum number of votes wins. That person may get only 13% of the vote, but is still a winner. What he's saying is that we should have not this jo aage by a whisker if he's there. whose nose is slightly 1 inch and he has won the race. So it's like a winner take all, and therefore, I mean, just to illustrate what he's saying, is that in 1999, when Mr. Vajpayee's coalition won, the Congress party had won 28.3% of the aggregate vote of India. Lok Sabha elections हुए थे, 28.3% votes were won by Congress party. How many seats did it get? 109 or 140, I think. 140, 141 or 140. In 2009, so 10 years later, not 2004, 2009, the Congress party aggregate vote tally is 28.5%. So 28.3 say 28.5% there. Vote and seat tally 206. So they went from Zoom from 140 to 206. So a 0.2% increase in their aggregate vote tally resulted in a 75% increase or whatever in their seat tally. And this is one of the features or bug or feature or anomaly or of this first past the post system. But I think this is such a fundamental reform that you are saying that we should shift to a proportional, the only other choice is proportional representation, where you get the number of seats in parliament you get is equal to percentage of the votes you got. So if Congress party got 28.5% of the vote, then they'll get 28% of the seats. But uske liye kya hoga malum hai? I'm just giving you one practical. I mean, this is a whole debate. You can have not just a lecture, but a full semester course on this. Basically, you will know how many votes you got post-election, right? So suddenly you find that आपने को 35% vote मिला total. So you have 35% हमको seats मिल रहा है. So 35% into 543. कोई तो जल्दी करो. 150 seats, whatever. So you have to now fill 150 vacancies. But if it was 35%, if you had got 29%, then you have only 137 vacancies. That means you need to have a list of all your eligible legislators, MPs. वो एक जैसा JEE का वेटिंग लिस्ट रहता है ना. And the top, now these people don't announce that Rahul Gandhi अभी Prime Minister candidate की सबको पता भी नहीं है हमको. You think these guys are going to prepare a list of people who will enter parliament one by one, first come, first serve? So that's really a very ambitious thing. It is used in many countries, for example in Germany, where it's really genuinely proportional representation. So the identity of MPs and the sort of personality and caste-based voting and all that, they don't have that. So I think the first past the post system does have benefits also actually. In fact, India also has 1200 political parties. No other country has, America has 2 political parties. Most countries have 3 or 4 political parties. We have 1200. So it's really, so it's a consequence of first past the post that the first past the post system gives voice to smaller minorities also. So as I said, this is a complicated topic.
Fragmented municipality because of this first vote. If you have that proportional representative become.
But in trying to reduce the fragmentation, we run the risk. Our country has the maximum diversity in the world, whether it is on, as I said, caste, religion, community, cuisine, culture, heritage, language. So we have to have a system which gives voice to all these sections of society. And first past the post system.
That will come if parties have their own constitution.
Internal democracy. Yeah.
One option. Sir, one option to that.
I agree. As I said, but this reform is so large that we have to travel the journey in smaller steps.
That direction. That direction.
Perhaps. But as I said, there are legitimate concerns about the negative aspects of proportional representation system. These are 2 different systems. First past the post and proportional is 2 different systems. And there are legitimate concerns about the negative aspects of it.
What is rational and what will be the right thing? That has to be thought of in the long run.
See, by the way, our constitution, when it was written, wait a minute, our constitution was written, the secretary to the drafting committee was Dr. Ambedkar. Okay. And this constitution had the benefit of hindsight of at least 2 major constitutions in the world. Constitution of the United States, which many people think is, बहुत उसके बारे में सुनते हैं, 1776, and the French Revolution happened in 1789, and many other constitutions. So I feel we have benefited from some of the finest constitutions of the world. So in में सब दिमाग लगा के लगा. So it's not as if they have not thought through many other things. In fact, you should read the constitutional debates which lasted. India became independent in 1947 But we became a republic proper with a constitution in 1950. 3 साल हुए तो चल रहा था. So don't think that they didn't think about these issues. By the way, it's proportional. It's not a new
the
thing.
constitution you're talking about, it was not completed. The Hindu code bell, where Ambedkar wanted to make women equal to the men in rights. That was not there in the constitution. So the main part that women are subdued was not there in the constitution.
No,
So our constitution, one minute.
I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm saying
So our constitution is made for the powers to remain in power so that we are subjugated. If I go to the court of law and I miss a date, they will summon me. But there is a public prosecutor, misses 100 days, nothing will happen. So the law, constitution is made for the rich or the powerful to remain in power. Nothing can be done about this election.
I know India also has a.
Then do whatever you want.
India also has this unique status that in the last 60 years we have had 112, 115 amendments to the constitution.
Yeah,
So we have a flexible constitution. In America का अभी कुछ 40 250 साल के बाद 40 amendments. In 60 years we have had 150 amendments.
But sir, there is a principal agent problem there, no? There is a principal agent problem. They will not self-reform. All the amendments will be for others.
Yeah, I think this journey has to be. Yeah, sorry.
I would like to know about your earlier journey, how you started getting involved.
Sorry, say it louder.
Yeah. I would like to know about your beginning years of how you. I would like to know about your earlier years, how you got involved in this work, and what are the challenges you got. Because for the generations like us, it's sort of difficult to move out of our comfort zones because of like, oh, बाहर जाओगे political parties से कैसे tackle करोगे या you know there is always that fear factor. So I would like to know how you negotiate with that.
No, luckily there was never any fear factor. I mean, I don't know. People ask me, I mean, there have been instances, I think in 2004, when we put out this information, as I said, this is a crunch time. It happens in 7-8 days. So in one particular Congress candidate, and this was published in the newspaper, so in the criminal cases are highlighted with photographs. So one prominent Congress candidate, it said he has crimes, he has charges, criminal charges under section 498 against him. Anybody know what is 498?
Domestic violence. Dowry. Domestic violence.
Molesting a married woman or something like that. So 498, it was published, and immediately there was fewer people from the party came, they threatened me. They said there was a lawsuit filed against me personally because by mistake, if you know in Marathi, it was written 499, and actually it was 499, not 498. It was in Marathi lettering. So 499 is defamation. So actually, he had cases against him on defamation. In India, again, unique country where a defamation case is not a civil case; it's a criminal case. But by mistake, it was typed data entry time 498 हुआ. Because actually in Marathi the letters somehow 8 or 9 were, and the irony was that this person actually his entire public life has been in protecting women's rights. But it was really hard, and it was a very close race between Shiv Sena, Congress, and one more party. 3 parties were. But so just to illustrate, so fear factor, I think to some extent it's not there because we have the strength of the network. You see, nobody is alone in this. You're never alone. When you in this kind of work, you're always together, and the strength is in numbers. You have to kind of reinforce each other. If you believe what I'm saying, then we have to reinforce each other. And this now the network of NGOs that we are part of, we call it National Election Watch. This is what an Amir Khan thing is. National Election Watch is the identity. It's not an organization. It's not a registered body. It's just an umbrella name. But it has more than almost 1,000 NGOs all over. And because of this strong network, we have access to some senior people, say people in the police or something. So we can, and they know that we are not doing anything. It is not for mischief. We are, by the way, the principles, 2 things that we subject ourselves to is that extremely non-partisan. That means we are neither for this party nor for that party, or not against any party. And secondly, we try to impose the same standard of transparency on ourselves that we ask from the lawmakers. So I think that's why the fear factor won't be there. And you have to find your own, see, I have a day job, I mean, believe it or not, so this I do in my spare time. So it's just the opportunity to be at the right place at the right time. Thoda bahut time mila, thoda network contacts, you have this, your IIT contacts. It's possible to do it. I can't, say, I mean, I was just lucky, I was just fortunate that I was able to be part of this. And over the years I've been able to continue my, but whatever little you can do, for example, if you in your local community can convince people to vote, and vote, they say thinking people, voting people don't think, and thinking people don't vote. So vote, think and vote. So even that, if you do, that's a lot.
Okay, this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's right to really go and vote, but suppose you're not convinced that any of them is really good.
Now you have the nota button.
No, but I'm saying up till now, then how would you advise? I mean, are there more systems of getting to know your candidates better, or even having some influence on the political parties as to which candidates they should have for election?
So that was the frustration, that while we have this great democracy and free of choice to vote, but the menu that you get, the menu card you get, you can only order from these 4 items. The menu, the candidates are pre-selected by the High Command. So the other thing we are pushing on, like I said, we work in 2 areas: electoral reforms, that is to get things like the nota button, more transparency, more that no criminals should be given tickets, and political party reforms. So have more inner party democracy, have more transparency about the funding, especially income of political parties and what they spend. Right now there is no regulation at all which affects political parties. They are subject to no regulation, unlike the companies or even organized trusts or.
They want to get out of RTI also.
So they want to get out of it, exactly. So that's the other area we work on. So I think these are all incremental. I think the fact is that often we hear, and this is a fact, that the political establishment themselves, they feel they are helpless. They also want to reform, but they feel they are locked into the system where if you don't spend money on elections, you are sure to lose. And if you spend money on elections, you still have no guarantee of winning. So they are in this Nash equilibrium.
Okay. Then two small points. Last person. Okay. One thing is to tell you, he is a little daring person. He has been trekking in Himalayas and wherever. That actually brings out a lot of daring in you. That's one part. And teamwork. The other thing is, I think we forgot to talk about the emergency time. When that particular ordinance was passed, not even passed, it was signed by the president before even cabinet had met.
Yeah.
It was signed, and then the cabinet met, I think at about 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And then I think by that time all the opposition was behind bars, and some of the Congress people who were against this were also behind bars.
So since you raised it, somebody mentioned KVD. Who was the president who signed it?
Everybody knows?
No,
I knew. I've written it.
That's right. People don't, they normally Gyani Zain Singh
So, I just wanted, the gentleman over there, was talking about government and other things, right? So, one of the best definitions of government that was probably given more than 1,000 years ago by Arabic, philosopher, is government is an institution or it's a system to prevent injustice to its people, except created by itself. Right? So, if we keep that in mind, right, citizens are aware of this. It's a very deep definition. We will go for smaller governments, smaller bureaucracy, right, which will help bring about better welfare or whatever.
On that, I just quick comment is we have to understand as intellectuals the difference between government, state, party, and society. I'll repeat the word. Government, state, party, and society. Just remember these 4. What are these 4 things? And like you said, government can't be, it's our government, right?
It's all, just as the first thing that you spoke about, they kind of become fixed. There is no separation.
For example, when I talk to my own mother, she sometimes, I don't think she's clear what is the difference between Rahul Gandhi and government. For example, before Rahul Gandhi objected, one Mr. Milind Devra also objected. Now Milind Devra actually is a minister. He's a minister of state, doesn't have cabinet rank. He's minister for IT and shipping, IT communication shipping. And he said he was against the ordinance. No, I was wondering, he's part of the government, he's part of the, he's not a part, at least Rahul Gandhi you can say he's a member of the party, he has nothing to do with the government. So he's free to express his displeasure and disapproval. Except the way he did it was extremely insubordination and disrespectful. But he is free to disagree. But the minister also disagreeing is more serious. So I'm saying this, at least constitution should be very clear. As a society, we are all, Indian society. State and society ka apparatus of the state, like you said, judiciary, the police. So, yeah.
No, politics today is more individual centric and becoming more and more so, and less party centric. So therefore, thoughts are suffering. Individuals are getting precedence. Is there any way that this process can check?
Yeah, it could be like personality driven, cult driven. So political parties are also, somebody told me in parliament, this is a fact, all the MPs who are below 30 have got there because of their parentage. So this is called STD, sexually transmitted democracy.